The wind cut like dry knives across the open plain. Gray cloud cover stretched low and wide, swallowing the late afternoon sun, turning everything to a dim kind of pewter. She walked with her head down, bonnet strings whipping against her cheek, her boots sinking into mud softened by last night's snowmelt. The children trailed behind her, quiet as ghosts, their breath coming in small white puffs. She hadn't meant to come here. Not to this town. Not to this place with its cracked storefronts and crooked boardwalks and people who stared too long without speaking. But the wagon wheel had broken near the creek and her boy was running a fever, and there was no choice but to walk. They passed the church, then the post office, then nothing but shuttered windows and whispering curtains. She kept moving. Her arms ached from carrying the youngest child too long. Her dress stuck to her back with sweat despite the cold. No one offered a word. No hand lifted in kindness. Her name didn't matter here, and that was just as well. If they knew it, they'd only whisper it louder. She reached the edge of town just as the last of the light fell behind the hills. The saloon flickered to life with yellow lamplight, a soft piano note drifting out before the door slammed shut again. That was when she saw him, leaning against a hitching post with his hat tipped low, a slow match burning between his fingers. A horse stood nearby, quiet and broad-shouldered, like it had seen too much already. He didn't speak at first, just watched. She meant to walk past, head down like always, but her knees buckled. She caught herself with one hand in the dirt, pulling the baby close to her chest. The boy stood frozen beside her, unsure. Her eldest, a girl of nearly 12, tried to help, but her arms were thin as twigs. He stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, quiet, not unkind, just that one word. She didn't look up. He crouched beside her. "You all right?" She finally raised her head. Her face was streaked with dust, her lips cracked. "Do I look all right?" His eyes flicked to the children, then back to her. "No. You don't?" She braced herself, waited for the rest of it, that usual tone, half pity, half judgment, but it didn't come. He just stood and offered a hand. She didn't take it. "I don't need your help." "Don't look like that's true," he said, not moving. The baby stirred in her arms, coughing weakly. He nodded toward the livery. "I've got a warm stall. Ain't much, but it's dry. Got a stove and some blankets. You can say no, but you shouldn't." She looked down at the dirt, then at her children, then up at the man again. Something in his face, weathered, quiet, without hunger or pride, made her breath hitch. "I don't trust strangers," she said. He gave the smallest smile she'd ever seen. "I'm not asking for that." The wind picked up. The girl began to cry. She stood slowly, using the fence for balance. Her back screamed with pain, her pride louder. But pride wouldn't feed her children, wouldn't warm their hands. She nodded once. He didn't speak again, just led the way. The stall was cleaner than she expected. There was a small pot-bellied stove near the back, still warm from whatever he'd last cooked. The air smelled faintly of oats and horses and wood smoke. He laid out a few blankets without a word, then stepped out and returned with a dented kettle, filling it with water from a nearby barrel. "What's your name?" she asked finally. "Levi." She waited. He didn't return the question, just poured the water into a tin cup and handed it to her. Her fingers brushed his. They stayed there for a heartbeat. Then the baby cried and the moment passed. That night she curled around her youngest on the straw-covered floor, her other children huddled close. Levi had left them in peace, bedding down in a stall across the barn. She could hear him whittling. The sound of the knife against wood was steady, soothing. She stared up at the rafters. Her muscles ached. Her heart ached worse. But for the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel like it wanted to kill her. The wind howled against the boards, but inside it was warm. Her daughter's hand found hers under the blanket. "Will we be all right, Mama?" she whispered. She didn't answer, just squeezed the girl's hand. Outside a horse stamped. Somewhere an owl called out. And the barn held. Morning broke slow and colorless. A thin crust of frost rimmed the inside of the barn door, and breath hung in the air like smoke. She woke stiff, her back tight and her neck locked from the straw. The baby was quiet against her chest, too still. She pressed a hand to his forehead. Cool now, thank God. Her daughter stirred beside her, pulling the blanket closer to her chin. Only the boy was already awake, crouched near the stove, poking at the coals with a stick. She sat up, joints protesting. Levi wasn't in the barn. His bedroll was folded neat, his tools stacked just so. The boy turned. He brought wood. Before sunup, she looked to the corner where a small stack of logs now leaned. Beside it, a bucket of water. 3 tin cups. A cloth-wrapped bundle that turned out to be biscuits, cold but soft, and 2 bruised apples. Her throat tightened. She stood shaking straw from her dress and stepped outside. The town looked different in morning light. Less cruel, maybe, or just more ordinary. Smoke rose from a few chimneys. A woman swept her porch without looking up. Children ran past chasing a half-deflated ball. No one greeted her. But no one stared either. She found Levi near the corral tossing hay to a restless gelding. He didn't glance over. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. He gave the horse a final pat and turned. "Why not? You don't know me." "No," he said, "but I can see you're tired. That all it takes a—" "No," he said, "but it's a start." She crossed her arms. "Folks around here don't take kindly to widows with children. They don't take kindly to much." He said it like a man who'd been on the wrong side of kindness before. She stepped closer. "You from here?" "Near enough," he said. "My folks had a claim out west. Grass turned to sand. They buried 2 babies before I turned 10. Father died trying to haul a plow that should have had a mule." He paused. "Mother followed a preacher east. Left me behind." She didn't speak. Just let the silence hold. "Stayed with a cattleman till I was grown. Learned to ride, fight men, fences, stay quiet." "You good at staying quiet," she said. He smiled, a dry crack in his weather-worn face. "It's a skill." She looked past him toward the hills. "I had a husband. Walter. He was good. Until he wasn't. Died in a fire. Folks think I lit it." His face didn't change. "I didn't," she added. "I know." "How?" He met her eyes. "Because you're still carrying too much to be guilty." She hadn't realized how close they stood until the air between them felt different, warmer, charged. She stepped back. "I'll find work." He nodded. "There's a boarding house that needs cleaning. And a widow who sells soap who could use help. It's not much. I've had not much before." They stood in that early light, 2 people with weather in their bones and stories that didn't need retelling. Later that day she scrubbed floors with her daughter beside her while her boy chopped wood behind the boarding house. The baby dozed in a basket wrapped in the cleanest blanket she had. Every now and then someone passed and paused just long enough to wonder if she'd last. She didn't care. That night she returned to the barn. Levi had fixed the latch on the door, mended a hole in the wall where the wind had whistled through. Didn't say a word about it. He ate a quiet supper with them on the barn floor, told her boy how to sharpen a blade without wrecking the edge, gave her daughter a spool of thread and a square of fabric, showed her how to stitch straight. He never asked what she planned to do next. He just stayed. And each day that passed, the barn felt less like a stall and more like a home. The children stopped flinching at sudden sounds. Her hands grew calloused again. Her back ached from work, not fear. She caught Levi watching her one evening, his eyes soft as old denim. She looked away first, But she didn't move far. Stay close to the fire. Subscribe now. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted not with grace, but in thick, stubborn clumps, turning the roads to sludge and peeling the paint from every building that had dared to look proud. But with the thaw came something else, a rhythm. She rose before first light, stirring ash into flame, pulling bread from the oven before the town woke. Her daughter fetched water. Her son took odd jobs. The baby learned to laugh again. She worked in town most days, scrubbing floors, mending linens, cutting lye soap with hands that had once bled from beating laundry on river stone. She did not smile often, but her eyes lost their edge. She came to know which shopkeepers paid fair, which ones did not, and who to avoid altogether. The women still crossed the street sometimes. The men watched with that same idle suspicion, as if grief might be catching, but no one stopped her. At night the barn was warm. Levy built shelves from scrap wood, fixed her boy's boots, taught her girl how to patch leather. He never asked what she needed, just noticed, just did. They spoke more now, always in the quiet moments between chores. She learned he liked the mountains best, said the air up there felt honest, that he had a brother once lost in a flood, that he never drank before noon and never when it rained. She listened more than she spoke, but slowly pieces of her life made their way out. My husband used to hunt quail, she said, once kneading dough on the workbench, but he never had the heart to shoot them. Said it felt like stealing song from the wind. Levy nodded. Sounds like a man with a soft hand and a loud mouth. She smiled. He was. That smile stayed with him longer than it should. The first real trouble came on a Tuesday. Levi was out riding fence past the ridge, and she was walking back from the schoolhouse with her girl when a man stepped in her path. Marshall Toller. Broad-shouldered, badge glinting in the late sun, eyes too sure of themselves. Need to speak with you, he said. Her daughter tense, small hand clinging tight. What about out? You've been staying in the livery, he said, eyes narrowing. With Levy Kane. She said nothing. That man's been trouble since he had teeth. And this town don't take kindly to scandal. We haven't done anything, she said, voice flat. No, but folks talk. You've got children. Don't want them picking up wrong ideas. Her jaw tightened. I've got children, Marshall, and they've slept warm, eaten full, and heard kindness for the first time in months. That's what they've picked up. He took a step closer. I'm warning you, ma'am. You'd do better to stay clear of him. She met his eyes. And he'd do better to stay clear of you, I reckon. The marshal stared a moment longer, then turned and walked off. Dust kicked up with his boots. Her daughter said nothing but clung to her all the way back. That night she told Levy. He didn't get angry, didn't curse or spit or go storming off. He just sat there on the stool near the stove, elbows on his knees, staring into the flame like it might hold the answer. I can leave, he said finally. You didn't do anything wrong. Never mattered much before. I don't want you to go. The words surprised even her. His eyes lifted. You're sure? She nodded, and for the first time his hand reached across the space between them. Calloused fingers brushing her wrist, not like a man claiming something, but like one asking. She didn't pull away. Outside the wind had died. The horses were quiet in their stalls. And inside the barn the silence wasn't empty anymore. It felt like something beginning. The next few weeks passed in that hush between storm and sun where everything felt fragile but possible. She felt it in the way her children laughed now without glancing over their shoulders, in the way her daughter sang to the baby while folding clothes, in the way her son watched Levi with quiet admiration, trying to match his walk, his way of holding a hammer like it belonged to him. She felt it most in the quiet moments when Levi lingered by the stove a little longer than needed, or when their hands brushed as they passed the bread, and neither of them looked away. But the town never forgot how to whisper. Rumors crept like weeds. She heard them in the general store in the pause of conversation when she entered the church kitchen to wash dishes. They called her shameless. Said a woman who lived in a barn with a man couldn't expect anything but damnation. They never said it to her face, but she felt it in the stares, the sharpened silences. It wore on her. One night she sat outside the barn after the children had gone to sleep. Her hands were cracked and aching from lie and wind. Her back ached. The moon cast long shadows across the pasture, stretching the fence posts into crooked arms. She wrapped her shawl tighter and stared at the dark hills. Levy joined her without a word, sat beside her on the step, a mug of something hot in his hand. They sat like that a while, neither speaking. Then she said, "I didn't come here to be saved. I know. I can raise my children on my own. I know that too. But it's easier," she said, "when someone stays." He turned his head, met her eyes. "I wasn't raised to know how to stay. I wasn't raised to expect it." They sat with that truth between them, and it didn't feel cold. Later that week she came home from town to find her son crying. The boy had gone to the creek with two other boys from town. Said they knocked him down, called him bastard. Said his mother was no better than a stray dog. She didn't cry. Not in front of him. She held his scraped elbow under cool water, whispered comfort as she stitched the tear in his shirt. But something in her hardened. That evening she walked into town alone. Found the marshal leaning against the jailhouse door, chewing tobacco and watching the clouds. "I know what kind of men you protect," she said. He spat. "You think you scare me?" he asked. "I think you don't know what fear is," she answered. He took a step forward, eyes narrowing. "Careful, widow." But she didn't move. "I'm not afraid of fire anymore." She turned and walked away, leaving his silence behind her like a stone. When she returned to the barn, Levi was in the corral oiling his saddle. He looked up, saw her face, and set the rag down. "They hurt my boy." "I know. You said you'd leave if it made things worse." "I did." "You still thinking of it?" He looked past her, toward the hills. "Every day." She swallowed. And, he stepped toward her. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just close. "I've run all my life," he said. "Every time I thought I didn't deserve something good. Every time I thought love was something for men better than me. But I'm tired of being a ghost." She reached for his hand, held it, and this time she didn't let go. The days turned warm. Grass rose from the thawed earth in tender, hesitant blades. Calves were born in the pasture behind the barn, bleating thin cries into the wind, and the town's tempo changed, still wary, still stiff, but quieter now in its judgment. Folks had seen her stay. That counted for something. She began selling bread in the mornings. Levi had built her a makeshift table near the church, sturdy and plain, just wide enough for a basket of loaves and a small pot of honey butter. Her girl sat beside her, learning kindness. Some folks passed without stopping, but others came drawn less by pity than by routine. A loaf, a nod, a word about the weather. Levi worked long days fencing for the McCall ranch, and when he came home at dusk, sweat-soaked and sun-dark, she always had a tin plate ready. He'd sit on the barn steps, stretch his legs, and eat with the slow, grateful quiet of a man who remembered hunger. Their talk came easy now. Worn things, gentle things. He told her about a dog he'd had as a boy, mean as a snake but loyal. She told him about her daughter's first word, how it had been no, and how proud she'd been of the fight in her. They didn't speak of the future, not directly. But one night he brought her a set of hinges he'd traded for in town. "For the door," he said. "Thought we might build you a real place to lock up." "A lock's no use if no one wants in," she said. He paused. "Then I want in." She looked up from the stitching in her lap. I want to build something, he said slower now. Not for show, not to prove anything. Just because it feels right. He held out the hinges. You think it might be time? She took them, fingers grazing his. I think we're already building it. They worked side by side the next Sunday, clearing brush from a patch of land near the creek. He showed her how to drive a post straight. She showed him how to read the clouds. The children helped too, hauling stones, marking boundaries with sticks. They didn't complain. They didn't ask questions. They just moved with the quiet trust of those who had known what it meant to go without. But peace never holds forever. It came on a Thursday. A man rode in from downriver, slick with sweat and dust, asking after a widow with 3 children. Said he was her late husband's cousin. Said he had claim to the land Walter had left behind and to the children by law and by blood. She stood still as he talked. Levy was beside her, arms folded, jaw tight. The man handed over a folded letter with a wax seal she recognized. Said it proved his custody, said he'd come to take what was his. Her son stepped behind her. Her daughter clutched her skirt. The baby whimpered. No, she said. You don't have a choice. Levy spoke then. She does. And she'll fight you if she has to. The man scoffed. With what, a handful of bread and a farm that ain't even built. With everything, she said. Because they're mine. That night, the barn was too quiet. The children had cried themselves to sleep, and Levi stood at the door with his rifle leaning against the frame. They won't take them, she said behind him. No. I don't care what paper he has. He's bluffing, Levi said. Even if he ain't, there's enough here that would back you. I'll ride out tomorrow. Talk to the judge in Oak Hill. We'll get ahead of this. She reached for his arm, not from fear but from need. Thank you. He turned, eyes dark in the low light. I'm not leaving. You're riding out. Not from this, he said. Not from you. He stepped close and for the first time kissed her, slow and steady and sure. The kind of kiss that says, I stayed. He left at dawn before the birds began their bickering and the children stirred. She packed him bread and a jar of blackberry preserves without saying much. Words felt too fragile in that moment. He kissed her cheek, then each of the children on the forehead. When he swung into the saddle, he looked back just once. She stood in the doorway holding the baby on her hip, her hair undone, and her shawl hanging loose. And for the first time in years, she looked like something still growing. The ride to Oak Hill would take him 2 days, 3 if the rains came. He promised to send word. She didn't ask how he'd pay for the filing or the ride or the paper trail that would name her guardian by law, not just love. She knew Levy well enough by now. He'd find a way. The days stretched long in his absence. She kept busy, scrubbed the bedding, turned soil, sold bread every morning with a sharper smile than usual, daring folks to speak ill of her. Her son watched the road with a kind of twitchy hope, as if Levi might appear at any moment. But the cousin returned first. He came not on a horse, but in a wagon rattling through town like he owned it. Stepped down in front of the boarding house and started asking questions again, louder this time. Claimed he had legal right, that a judge would side with blood. He made sure she heard every word. That night she didn't sleep. She sat outside the barn with her shotgun across her knees, eyes fixed on the ridge. She wasn't just scared for herself now, she was scared for the life they'd begun to build. And scared that once again the past would come and take everything before it could settle. The next morning she found her daughter in the field, twisting stems into circles. What are you making? She asked. The girl shrugged. Rings. Why? Because you and Levi need one. Her heart ached with something too big for words. By afternoon the sky had turned an iron gray, and the air hung with that eerie stillness that comes before a storm. She was chopping wood when she heard it hooves. She turned, axe still in hand. Levi. His coat was soaked through his hat pulled low, but he looked unshaken. He slid off his horse, tied it without speaking, and handed her a packet wrapped in oilskin. The judge's seal was still damp. "You have guardianship," he said. "Signed and stamped." She stared at it. "You did it." "You did it," he said softer now. "I just rode fast." And then he pulled something else from his coat. Smaller, rough. A ring carved from bone and silver worn smooth by the road. "I didn't ask proper," he said. "But I figure I ought to now." The words didn't need to be fancy. She nodded, her eyes stinging. The children came running from the barn. The baby laughed. The storm broke open in the distance, rain sweeping across the plain like a sheet. But where they stood, the wind calmed. She reached for his hand, held it tight. They had no preacher, no church bells, no white dress or polished boots, just a ring, a barn, and 3 children watching with wide eyes. And still it was enough. That night they didn't sleep apart. They lay together with the children curled nearby, the rain drumming a slow rhythm on the roof. The barn was dim, warm, and filled with the scent of wood smoke and wet earth. Outside, the town stayed quiet. Inside, a family had begun. Summer settled into the valley like an old dog, slow, dusty, full of heat and silence. Days began early with birds bickering in the eaves and the baby's cries mixing with the whistle of the kettle. She moved through them with steady purpose, planting rows of beans behind the barn, stitching clothes, learning to stretch every coin and every crumb. Levi built the frame of their house just uphill using lumber from a sawmill up near Low Pass. He came home each evening with splinters in his palms and sunburn across his neck. She would press cool cloth to his skin while the children played in the grass, and they would talk not of the past, not always of the future, but of what needed fixing, who had grown taller, what birds she saw near the creek. Their life wasn't made of grand declarations. It was 1,000 small kindnesses. One morning the baby took his first steps in the dirt outside the barn. Wobbly, laughing arms thrown out like wings. Her daughter clapped. Her son grinned like he'd won a prize. Levi dropped his hammer and just watched, smiling with something soft in his chest. She caught his hand and didn't let go. The townsfolk had grown quiet, not exactly warm but less cold. A few nodded when they passed. Old Mr. Clary brought them nails when his back kept him from building his own fence. Miss Judith from the church asked her to help sew choir robes. The woman who ran the boarding house offered a crate of peaches in thanks for extra washing. She didn't trust it, not fully, but she accepted it one offering at a time. Still, not everything was easy. Her son had nightmares, some nights worse than others. He'd wake up gasping, fists clenched, eyes wide, like he expected the barn to be burning. Levi would sit beside him without speaking sometimes until the boy fell back asleep, leaning against his arm. The girl, quiet and too sharp for her age, had begun to ask questions about heaven, about God, about why people leave and don't come back. She answered as best she could. Sometimes she just held them. One night after the children had gone to sleep, Levi found her standing near the edge of the new house frame, staring up at the stars. She didn't turn when he stepped behind her. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," she said. "Like all this isn't meant to last." "It is," he said. "You don't know that." "I do," he answered, calm. "Because I've never stayed anywhere long enough to feel scared of losing it." She turned to face him. "I don't want to lose you," she said. "You won't." He said it the way a man says his name, plain, certain, without needing to prove it. In late August, the house was finished. It wasn't much. 2 rooms, a wood stove, a roof that still creaked in the wind. But it had glass windows. A porch levee carved himself. A small wooden cradle made from the leftover pine nestled near the bed. They moved in on a Friday. No fanfare. Just her carrying the baby, her daughter with the sewing box, the boy with an armload of firewood, and Levi carrying a kettle and a hammer. Later that night, after supper, the four of them sat on the porch while the sun sank behind the hills. The fields shimmered gold and rust. The wind smelled of sage and warm dirt. The baby dozed in her lap. The boy leaned against Levi's shoulder. Her daughter traced shapes into the soft wood of the porch rail. Levi reached for her hand. She let her head rest on his shoulder. They said nothing. There was nothing left to explain. The past had left scars, but the future, this one they'd built from bone and bread and sheer will, was soft around the edges. Real in a way that couldn't be undone. A home. A life. Chosen. Subscribe and walk into what comes after loss.